The sound of dishes breaking filled the big kitchen in the Hawthorne mansion, followed by a small scream. Charlotte Pearson, a 28-year-old maid, quickly bent down to pick up the pieces. Her hands shook, and her heart was beating fast. She was used to daydreaming sometimes, but this was the first time it caused such a mess. "Mrs. Pearson, is everything okay in there?" called a deep voice from the hallway. It was Mr. Sebastian Hawthorne, her boss. "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne. Just a little accident. I'm already cleaning it up," Charlotte answered, trying to sound calm. But then she heard footsteps. Soon, Sebastian, who was 35 years old and the owner of the grand mansion, appeared in the kitchen doorway. His sharp blue eyes looked at Charlotte, who was on the floor surrounded by broken pieces of a fancy plate. "Leave it, Charlotte. You might hurt yourself," he said gently, his voice softer than she'd ever heard. He stepped closer and knelt beside her. "What happened?" Charlotte's cheeks turned red. She always got nervous when Mr. Hawthorne was nearby. "I got distracted for a second. I'm so sorry about the plates," she said quietly. Sebastian smiled a little and shook his head. "They're just plates. What matters is that you're okay." He reached out and gently took the cleaning cloth from her hands. Their fingers brushed for a moment, and Charlotte's face grew warmer. "Go take a break. That's an order," he said, his voice kind but firm. "And in 10 minutes, meet me in the library. There's something I want to talk to you about." He started cleaning up the mess himself. Charlotte stared at him, surprised. In all the 3 years she had worked for him, she had never seen him clean anything before. But the bigger surprise was that he wanted to meet her in the library. She left the kitchen, her heart still racing, and checked her reflection in the window glass. She saw a young woman with brown hair tied back and hazel eyes that looked both hopeful and a little sad. 10 minutes later, Charlotte knocked on the library door. "Come in," Sebastian called. She opened the door to see him sitting behind a giant wooden desk. The library was beautiful, with tall shelves filled with books, a cozy fireplace, and big windows showing the pretty gardens outside. "Please, have a seat," Sebastian said, pointing to a chair. Charlotte sat down, nervously wringing her hands. "Mr. Hawthorne, I'm really sorry about breaking the plates. I promise it won't happen again." Sebastian raised his hand, stopping her. "That's not why I wanted to talk, Charlotte. I have something unusual to ask you." She tilted her head, curious but also worried. "As you know, I'm getting married to Bianca West in a month," he began. Charlotte nodded, even though her chest felt tight. Everyone in the small town of Cedar Grove had been talking about the wedding between the rich Sebastian and the beautiful Bianca. "What you may not know," Sebastian continued, "is that we're having trouble finding the right person to handle all the wedding plans. Bianca has high standards, and none of the people we've interviewed have worked out." "I'm sorry to hear that," Charlotte said, still confused. "But what does that have to do with me?" Sebastian leaned forward, looking right at her. "Over the past 3 years, you've proven yourself to be trustworthy, organized, and capable. You know this house better than anyone. I'd like you to take charge as the housekeeper for the wedding." Charlotte froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Help with the wedding? His wedding? It felt like a cruel joke. I don't know, Mr. Hawthorne," she stammered. "I've never done anything like that before." "You can do it, Charlotte," he said with a kind smile. "You're good at organizing, handling people, and paying attention to details. Plus, I'd feel better knowing you were in charge. You have a way of keeping things calm." Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to say no. It would hurt too much to help with the wedding of the man she secretly cared about. But at the same time, how could she refuse such a heartfelt request? Before she could decide, the door suddenly swung open. Bianca West walked in. She was tall, blonde, and dressed perfectly, like a princess from a fancy storybook. "Alex, darling," Bianca said, her voice sweet but sharp, "you won't believe what happened with the flowers we ordered." She stopped when she saw Charlotte. Her happy smile faded and her eyes narrowed. "Oh, I didn't know you were busy." Sebastian stood up. "Bianca, this is important." Bianca's gaze flicked to Charlotte. "What's going on?" "I'm asking Miss Pearson to help with the wedding." Sebastian explained. "She'll be the housekeeper in charge." Bianca's eyes widened, then narrowed again. "The maid?" she said, her tone cold. "Really, Alex?" Charlotte stood quickly, feeling like she didn't belong in the room anymore. "I should go," she said softly. "No, Charlotte," Sebastian said firmly. "Stay." He turned back to Bianca. "Miss Pearson is not just a maid, she's someone I trust completely. She's more than capable of doing this." Bianca crossed her arms, glaring at Charlotte. "And what about you?" she asked. "Do you think you're ready for such a big job?" Charlotte felt her face burn, but she took a deep breath and stood tall. "If Mr. Hawthorne trusts me, I'll do my very best, and I'll make sure your wedding is perfect, Miss Sinclair." The room went silent. Sebastian smiled softly, looking proud. Bianca, however, seemed angry and not convinced. "Fine," Bianca said at last, her voice icy. "I hope you know what you're doing, Alex. And I hope you know what you've just agreed to, Miss Pearson." With that, Bianca turned and left the room, her expensive perfume lingering behind her. Charlotte stood there, her heart pounding, wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the most important decision. Sebastian let out a big sigh. "I'm sorry about that, Charlotte," he said. "I'm sure Bianca will get used to the idea." Charlotte nodded, still feeling surprised by what just happened. "Mr. Hawthorne, are you sure this is a good idea? I don't want to cause problems between you and your fiancé." Sebastian stepped closer, gently placing his hand on Charlotte's shoulder. Even though it was only for a second, it made her shiver. "I'm absolutely sure," he said softly. "I trust you, Charlotte, more than you know." Their eyes met, and Charlotte thought she saw something in Sebastian's gaze, something deeper than the trust of a boss in his worker. But just as quickly as the moment appeared, it was gone. Sebastian stepped back. "Well," he said with a small smile, "I think we have a lot of work to do. How about we start tomorrow? I'm sure you have lots of great ideas to make this wedding unforgettable." Charlotte nodded, trying to ignore the strange feelings swirling in her chest. "Yes, sir. I'll be ready." As she walked out of the library, Charlotte couldn't stop thinking. She had just agreed to plan the wedding for the man she secretly loved, Sebastian, to another woman. She didn't know what the coming days would bring, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same at the Hawthorne mansion. The next morning, the mansion was covered in a soft mist, like a big cloud had come down to hug the house. Charlotte woke up before the sun, her dreams full of wedding dresses and Sebastian's kind eyes. She got ready, choosing a nicer outfit than usual, and tied her hair into a neat bun. Now that she was in charge of planning the wedding, she wanted to look her best. At exactly 7 a.m., Charlotte knocked on Sebastian's office door. His voice called out, "Come in." "Good morning, Miss Pearson," Sebastian said, looking up from the papers on his desk. For a moment, he looked surprised by her fancy clothes, but then he smiled warmly. "I see you're ready for your new role." Charlotte nodded, feeling warm under his gaze. "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne, I thought we should start early. There's a lot to do." "Great idea," he said, motioning for her to sit down. "First, I want to give you this." Sebastian slid a folder across the desk. Charlotte opened it and her eyes widened. Inside was a contract with her new job duties and a salary that was double what she made before. "Mr. Hawthorne, this is very generous," Charlotte said, almost stammering. Sebastian smiled. "It's the least I can do for what I'm asking you to take on. And please, call me Sebastian. We'll be working closely together over the next few weeks." Calling him by his first name felt like crossing an invisible line. "I'll try. Sebastian," she said nervously. He grinned, looking pleased. "Good. Now let's get started." He handed her another folder. "This is the list Bianca left for the wedding plans." Charlotte opened the folder and her jaw dropped. flowers imported from Holland, a 7-tier cake from a famous New York chef, and a band that played for celebrities. The list went on and on. "This is ambitious," Charlotte said politely. Sebastian chuckled. "That's a kind way of saying it's over the top, isn't it? Bianca wants the wedding to be like something out of a Hollywood movie." For the first time, Charlotte noticed a tired look on his face, as if he wasn't excited about all the fuss. "Well," Charlotte said, trying to stay positive, "maybe we can find a balance between what Bianca wants and something more realistic." Sebastian looked at her, his face softening. "That's why I trust you, Charlotte. You have a way of making the impossible happen." Her cheeks flushed at the compliment. "I'll do my best, Sebastian." The days flew by as Charlotte got to work. She coordinated with vendors, directed the staff, and tried to find a middle ground between Bianca's big dreams and what was actually possible. One day, Charlotte was in the garden talking to the events company about where to set up a tent for the reception. Suddenly, Bianca's sharp voice interrupted. "I thought we agreed on a bigger tent," Bianca said, frowning. Charlotte stayed calm. "The bigger tent would damage the rose bushes, Miss Sinclair. They're part of the Everett family history." Bianca waved her hand dismissively. "So what? They're just flowers. This is the most important day of my life." Charlotte tried to stay polite. "I understand, Miss Sinclair, but I think Sebastian would want to keep them safe." Bianca's eyes narrowed. "And since when are you an expert on what Sebastian wants?" Before Charlotte could reply, Sebastian himself walked into the garden. "Charlotte's right, Bianca. The roses stay," he said firmly. Bianca's expression softened as she turned to Sebastian. "Of course, darling," she said sweetly. Sebastian smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I trust Charlotte to make sure everything will be perfect," he said. As Bianca walked away with Sebastian, Charlotte noticed how tense his shoulders were. Something wasn't right, and it wasn't just the stress of wedding planning. That evening, Charlotte was in the kitchen reviewing the dinner menus when she heard Sebastian and Bianca arguing in the hallway. "I don't see why you trust her so much," Bianca said angrily. "Because Charlotte knows this house better than anyone," Sebastian replied, his voice firm. "She's just a maid, Alex. You treat her like she's—" Bianca paused, choosing her words carefully. "Like she's more than that." There was a long silence. Then Sebastian said quietly, "Maybe she is." Charlotte froze, her heart pounding. What did he mean by that? Before she could think any more, the kitchen door opened. Sebastian walked in, looking surprised to see her. "Charlotte," he said softly, his voice full of an emotion she couldn't quite name. I didn't mean to overhear," she stammered. "I was just—" Sebastian raised his hand, gently stopping her. "It's okay," he said. "Actually, I'm glad I found you here. There's something I need to tell you." He stepped closer, and Charlotte's heart raced as she waited to hear what he would say. Charlotte felt her cheeks grow warm as Sebastian stood close, his eyes full of something she couldn't explain. Everything about the moment felt different, as if it meant something important. "Charlotte, Sebastian began, his voice soft and serious. But just as he started to speak, the loud ringing of the kitchen phone interrupted him. The spell was broken. Charlotte grabbed the phone without thinking. It was the florist with a question about the flowers for the wedding. By the time she hung up, Sebastian was gone. She stood alone in the kitchen, her heart pounding and her head spinning. What had he wanted to tell her? And what did the things she had overheard the other day really mean? The Hawthorne mansion was quiet that night, but Charlotte could feel that something had changed. The wedding plans kept moving forward, but there was now an uneasy feeling in the air. With a sigh, she turned to the menus she needed to review. The wedding was so close, and there was still so much to do. But for the first time, she let herself imagine maybe the ending to this story wasn't written yet. The next morning, Charlotte woke up early. She still couldn't stop thinking about the night before. What had Sebastian meant to say? What if the phone hadn't rung? Shaking her head, she tried to push those thoughts away. There was too much work to do. When she walked into the kitchen, she was surprised to see Sebastian already there. He had a cup of coffee in his hands, and he looked tired. "Good morning, Charlotte," he said with a small smile. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. "Good morning, Sebastian," she replied, feeling awkward saying his name. She quickly busied herself making her own coffee, trying to ignore how tense the room felt. "Charlotte," Sebastian said, breaking the silence. "About last night," her heart raced. "Yes?" But before he could finish, the kitchen door opened, and Bianca walked in. She looked perfect, as always, even though it was still early. "Oh, what a nice little meeting," Bianca said with a sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How cozy." Sebastian stood up quickly. "Bianca, I didn't expect you so early." "Clearly," Bianca replied, her eyes flicking between him and Charlotte. "I came to talk about some changes to the guest list." Sebastian frowned. "Changes? We already finalized it." Bianca waved her hand like it wasn't a big deal. "Just a few additions, important people. The governor said he'd come if we invite him, and there's that investor you were trying to impress." Sebastian rubbed his hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "Bianca, we agreed on keeping the wedding small, just close friends and family." "But, darling," Bianca said sweetly, though her eyes glinted with determination, "think of the connections we could make. It's the event of the year." Charlotte stood there, wishing she could disappear. She tried to quietly leave, but Bianca's voice stopped her. "What about you, Miss Pearson? You're the wedding planner. Surely you have an opinion." Charlotte froze. It's not my place to say." "Nonsense," Bianca insisted, smiling tightly. "You must think something." Sebastian's gaze met Charlotte's, daring her to speak honestly. Taking a deep breath, Charlotte decided to answer. "I think weddings should reflect what the couple wants. If Sebastian wants something smaller, we should respect that." The room went silent. Bianca's smile vanished. "I see," she said coldly. "You seem to have quite the influence here, Miss Pearson. Perhaps too much." "Bianca," Sebastian said firmly, "Charlotte is doing her job and she's right. This is our wedding, not a business event." Bianca's face hardened and her eyes flashed with anger. "We'll talk later," she snapped before storming out of the kitchen. Sebastian sat down heavily, sighing. "I'm sorry you had to see that, Charlotte." "It's okay," Charlotte said gently, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Weddings can be stressful." He looked up at her, his eyes full of so many emotions. "It's more than that. I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing." "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Sebastian stood and took a step closer to her. "I mean, since you've been here, I've been thinking differently, feeling differently." He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was soft and brief, but it felt like the world had stopped. When he pulled back, Charlotte could barely breathe. "Sebastian, don't say anything," he said quickly. "I know this makes everything complicated, but I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I need time to think." Then he left, leaving Charlotte standing there, her mind and heart racing. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Charlotte tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept going back to Sebastian's kiss and his words. What did they mean? What should she do? That afternoon, Bianca confronted her in the garden. "I know what you're doing," Bianca said angrily. "It ends now." "I'm not doing anything, Miss Sinclair," Charlotte replied, trying to stay calm. "Don't play dumb," Bianca snapped. "Sebastian is my fiancé. This wedding will happen and you won't get in the way." Charlotte's anger flared. "With all due respect, if there are problems between you and Sebastian, maybe you should talk to him, not me." Bianca's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Miss Pearson. Remember your place." As Bianca walked away, Charlotte felt her frustration boiling over. The wedding was less than 2 weeks away, and everything felt like it was falling apart. That night, Charlotte sat in her room trying to decide what to do. Should she ignore her feelings and continue as if nothing had happened? Or should she face the truth, even if it meant risking everything? The next morning, Sebastian came to see her. He looked troubled but determined. "Charlotte," he said, "we need to talk." He told her how he had realized something important. "This wedding isn't me," he said. "It never was. Bianca and I got engaged when I was lost and needed stability. But since you've been here, I've seen what really matters." Charlotte's heart pounded. What did this mean for her? For Sebastian? For the wedding? One thing was certain, everything was about to change. Charlotte sat very still, barely breathing, afraid to ruin the moment. "What really matters, Sebastian?" she asked quietly. Sebastian stepped closer and gently held her hands. "You, Charlotte, you matter. What I feel for you is real, something I've never felt before. Not even for Bianca." His words hung in the air like a secret waiting to be shared. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. "Sebastian, I feel something for you too. I have for a long time. But your wedding, your fiancé, it's all too much." Sebastian gave her a sad smile and nodded. "I know. That's why I need to make a decision. I can't marry Bianca, not now. It wouldn't be fair to her or to anyone because of how I feel." Just then, the office door burst open with a loud bang. Bianca stormed in, her eyes blazing with anger. She stopped when she saw Charlotte and Sebastian holding hands. "So this is it," Bianca said, her voice shaking. "All this time, while I was planning our life together, you were falling in love with the maid?" Sebastian quickly let go of Charlotte's hands and turned to face Bianca. "Bianca, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't keep pretending." "Pretending," Bianca interrupted, her voice rising. "The only pretending here is this." She pointed at Charlotte. "She's been tricking you, Sebastian. Don't you see? She took her chance and went for it." Charlotte felt anger rise in her chest. "That's not true, Miss Sinclair. I would never." "Shut up," Bianca shouted, stepping closer. "You've ruined everything. Years of planning, every connection we worked on, it's all gone because of a silly crush." Sebastian stepped between the two women, his voice firm but calm. "Enough, Bianca. This isn't about Charlotte. The truth is, you and I both know this marriage was a mistake. We're together for the wrong reasons." Bianca's face turned pale. "Wrong reasons? And what reasons are those? Love? Passion? Don't be so foolish, Sebastian. Marriages like ours are about power, alliances, and securing a future." "Maybe for you," Sebastian said softly, "but I've realized I want more. I want a real partnership built on respect and shared dreams. I want," he looked at Charlotte, "true love." The room grew quiet. Bianca's eyes flicked between them, the truth sinking in. "You really love her," she said, her voice bitter. Sebastian nodded. "I do. I'm sorry, Bianca. I never wanted to hurt you." Bianca let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Hurt me? You don't even know what you've done." She turned to Charlotte, her eyes icy. "And you. You better enjoy this while it lasts, because I'll make sure you have nothing left." With that, Bianca stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard that the paintings on the walls shook. For a long time, Charlotte and Sebastian stood in silence. Finally, Charlotte whispered, "What do we do now?" Sebastian wrapped his arms around her. "Now, we face whatever happens, together." Charlotte rested her head against his chest. She knew the storm wasn't over. There was still a wedding to cancel, guests to inform, and the staff at the mansion to handle, and Bianca's threat hung over them like a dark cloud. But for now, in Sebastian's arms, she allowed herself a small moment of hope. As the day went on, word of the canceled wedding spread quickly. Charlotte and Sebastian spent hours making calls and sending emails to let everyone know. The mansion staff, though surprised, offered their support. Eleanor, the head cook, gave Charlotte a hug and said, "I always knew you two had something special." That evening, Charlotte and Sebastian finally had a quiet moment. They sat on a bench in the garden, surrounded by blooming roses. The sky was painted with orange and pink as the sun set. "Do you regret it?" Charlotte asked softly, her fingers intertwined with Sebastian's. Sebastian looked at her and smiled. Not for a second. I know things will be hard, but for the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. Charlotte nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. We still have to deal with Bianca's threat. We'll handle that when it comes, Sebastian said gently. For now, I just want to enjoy this moment with you. As night fell, the two of them sat close, ready to face whatever the future held. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Charlotte's window. For a moment, she thought the events of the previous day were a dream, but then she remembered everything. Sebastian's confession, Bianca's fury, and the cancelled wedding. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Charlotte? Sebastian's voice called. Are you awake? She quickly smoothed her robe and opened the door. Sebastian stood there looking tired but determined. He smiled. Good morning. Can we talk? There's something important. Of course, Charlotte said. Just let me get dressed. 15 minutes later, they met on the back porch. Sebastian had set up a simple breakfast, and the view of the garden felt peaceful. But Charlotte could see the worry in his eyes. What's wrong? She asked, sitting down. Sebastian sighed, running a hand through his hair. Bianca's making good on her threat. Charlotte's heart sank. What is she doing? She's suing Hawthorne Manor, Sebastian explained. She claims canceling the wedding ruined her reputation and caused her financial loss. And that's not all. He hesitated. There's more? Charlotte asked. She's also threatening to go to the press, Sebastian said, his voice heavy. She wants to tell them a story, one where you tricked me and ruined the wedding. Charlotte felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. That's not true. She can't say that. I know, Sebastian said, taking her hand. My lawyer says we can fight it, but if this gets out, it could damage the reputation of my family and the business. Tears welled up in Charlotte's eyes. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to cause trouble for you. Sebastian squeezed her hand. This isn't your fault. I'm the one who made the decision to stop the wedding, and I'm the one who chose you because I love you. Despite the challenges ahead, Charlotte felt comfort in his words. Together, they would face whatever came next. Sebastian and Charlotte sat quietly for a moment, the air heavy with worry. Finally, Charlotte broke the silence. Her voice was quiet but strong. What can we do? She asked. Sebastian gave a sad smile. My lawyer thinks we should meet with Bianca and her team. He believes we can solve this without going to court. But what else? Charlotte asked, encouraging him to continue. Sebastian sighed deeply. He also thinks it's best if you stay away from the mansion for a while. This will stop people from gossiping and give us time to fix things. Charlotte felt like the ground was falling away under her feet. Do you want me to leave? She asked softly. No, Sebastian exclaimed, standing up and rushing to her side. He knelt down and held her hands tightly. Charlotte, I don't want to be away from you. I just want to keep you safe from Bianca and her tricks. Charlotte nodded slowly. It made sense, even if her heart didn't like it. Where will I go? Sebastian's face softened, and a small smile appeared. Do you remember the little cottage my family owns in the mountains? I think it would be a nice place for you to stay for a few weeks until we sort this all out. The thought of being far away, alone in a house in the mountains, scared Charlotte. But she knew Sebastian was right. When should I leave? She asked in a whisper. This afternoon, Sebastian said, his voice heavy. The sooner we fix this, the sooner we can be together again. Charlotte swallowed hard and nodded. Okay, I'll pack my things. The next few hours flew by. Charlotte packed her clothes and said goodbye to the staff at the mansion. Many of them told her they hoped she'd be back soon. Before she knew it, she was in the car with Sebastian, heading to the mountains. For 2 hours, they drove in peaceful silence, holding hands as the city turned into winding mountain roads. Tall pine trees lined the path, and the air grew cooler. When they reached the cottage, Charlotte was surprised. It was cozy and beautiful, with a wide porch and big windows looking out at the mountains. Inside, it had a stone fireplace and a kitchen that looked both old-fashioned and modern. Sebastian helped her carry her bags and walked with her through the house, showing her each room. When it was time for him to leave, they stood on the balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. "I'll fix this as soon as I can," Sebastian promised, holding her face in his hands. "Then we'll be together with nothing in our way." Charlotte tried not to cry. "I know, I'll be okay. Don't worry." Sebastian kissed her deeply as if trying to remember everything about her. When they pulled away, they were both out of breath. "I love you, Charlotte," Sebastian said, his voice full of emotion. "Never forget that." "I love you too," Charlotte replied with a small smile. "Now go and fix this mess." With one last kiss, Sebastian got in the car and drove away. Charlotte stood on the porch, watching until the car disappeared. Inside the cottage, she lit a fire in the fireplace and sat quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. Her life had changed so much. She went from planning a big wedding to staying in a quiet mountain house. It was scary, but also exciting. Charlotte picked a book from the shelf and settled on the sofa. She knew the next days would be lonely, but she was determined to stay strong. No matter what happened, she and Sebastian had something special, and she would fight for it. The days at the cottage passed slowly. In the mornings, Charlotte listened to birds singing and drank coffee. In the afternoons, she walked through the forest. At night, she sat by the fire, feeling both peaceful and restless. Every time the phone rang, her heart jumped, hoping it was Sebastian with news. One sunny afternoon, about a week after she arrived, her phone buzzed. Seeing Sebastian's name, she quickly answered. "Sebastian, what's happening?" His voice sounded tired. "Hello, my love. We had our first meeting with Bianca's lawyers today." Charlotte's stomach tightened. "How did it go?" Sebastian sighed. "It was tough. Bianca isn't willing to compromise. She wants a lot of money, and she's bringing up things from my past." "What kind of things?" Charlotte asked carefully. There was a pause before Sebastian spoke. "Remember when I told you Bianca helped me after my dad died? Well, there's more to that story." "What do you mean?" Charlotte's voice was barely above a whisper. "After my dad passed, I didn't handle it well," Sebastian admitted. "I drank too much and made bad decisions. Bianca was the one who helped me get back on track." Charlotte stayed quiet, letting him continue. "Now, she's threatening to share proof, pictures, emails, things that could hurt my family's reputation if we don't give her what she wants." "Oh, Sebastian," Charlotte said, her heart aching for him. "I'm so sorry you went through that. Why didn't you tell me before?" "I didn't want to burden you with it," Sebastian said, guilt in his voice. "And I hope Bianca wouldn't stoop this low." Charlotte took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What are we going to do?" "My lawyers are working on a plan," Sebastian explained. "We're trying to make an offer she'll accept without ruining the family's finances, but it's going to take time." "I love you, Sebastian," Charlotte said firmly. "No matter what happened in the past, we're in this together." "I love you too," Sebastian replied, his voice soft. "Thank you for standing by me." After the call, Charlotte stared out at the mountains, her mind racing. She thought about everything Sebastian had told her. Then she remembered something in the cottage, a photo album. She opened it and flipped through the pages, seeing pictures of Sebastian as a young man. In the early photos, he looked carefree and happy. As she turned the pages, his smile became more serious. Near the end, there was a picture of him with Bianca. In the photo, Bianca had her hand on Sebastian's arm, almost like she was holding on to him. Charlotte stared at the picture, realizing how complicated things really were. Bianca wasn't just greedy, she had shared a big part of Sebastian's life. Death. That evening, as Charlotte sat by the fire, she made a decision. She couldn't just sit and wait. If she and Sebastian were going to fight for their future, she had to help. She opened her laptop and began researching everything she could about laws, deals, and how to handle someone like Bianca. As the night went on, a risky plan formed in her mind. When the sun rose the next day, Charlotte was ready. She packed her bag and called someone she trusted. "Eleanor," she said when the cook answered, "I need a favor." Then, with her heart racing, Charlotte got in her car and left the mountain cottage. Charlotte was starting a big adventure, one that could be full of surprises, danger, and maybe even a bright future. As the little town of Cedar Grove appeared in the distance, she took a deep breath. She had a plan. She had courage. Most of all, she had love. Charlotte was ready to face Bianca and fight for the life she and Sebastian dreamed of. The first rays of the morning sun lit up the streets as Charlotte smiled, ready for whatever would happen. She knew she wouldn't regret taking this risk because love often means being brave. The morning sun was just starting to shine when Charlotte parked her car in front of a fancy cafe in the middle of Cedar Grove. Her heart was beating fast as she checked her watch. Only 10 minutes to go. Charlotte walked into the cafe where the smell of coffee and fresh croissants filled the air. Normally, these smells would calm her, but not today. Today was different. Her eyes quickly found Bianca West, sitting at a table in the back. Bianca's makeup was perfect, but her face looked serious. Charlotte straightened her back, held her head high, and walked over. "Miss Sinclair, thank you for meeting me," Charlotte said politely. Bianca raised one eyebrow. "I was curious about your message, Miss Pearson. Or should I call you the future Mrs. Hawthorne?" she said with a sly smile. Charlotte ignored the comment and sat down. "I want to talk about the deal you're making with Sebastian." Bianca leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "And what could you possibly have to say about that?" Charlotte took a deep breath. "I want to offer you a different plan, one that's good for everyone." Bianca laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. And what plan might that be? Before answering, Charlotte's voice became strong. "First, you need to understand something. I love Sebastian, not for his money or his name, but for who he really is, and I will do whatever it takes to protect him." Bianca's face changed, becoming hard. "Love? You don't know what love is, not when it comes to Sebastian. I helped him when he was broken. I was there when no one else was. Where were you then, Miss Pearson?" Charlotte stayed calm. "I know what you've done for Sebastian, Bianca, and I thank you for it. But what you're doing now, it's not love. It's revenge." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared at each other. The air between them felt tense and heavy. Finally, Bianca broke the silence. "What do you want, Charlotte?" Charlotte reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I've been learning about you, your history with Sebastian, and the Everett family business." She slid the folder across the table, and I found some interesting things. Bianca opened the folder carefully, her face showing surprise and a bit of worry. "Is this a threat?" she asked. "No," Charlotte replied quickly. "It's a deal. You stop your threats and lawsuits against Sebastian, and in return, I offer you this." Inside the envelope was a contract. Charlotte explained, "It's a job offer. You'll have a role as a consultant in the family business. With your skills and knowledge, you'd be a big help to the company. Plus, this will give you a chance to make a name for yourself, separate from Sebastian." Bianca stared at the papers in shock. "Why would you do this? After everything?" "Because I love Sebastian," Charlotte said softly, "and part of loving him is appreciating what you've done for him in the past. Now it's time for all of us to move forward." Bianca didn't say anything at first. She just looked at the papers, her emotions showing on her face. Finally, she looked up. "You're not what I expected, Miss Pearson," she said, a little bit of respect in her voice. Charlotte smiled. "No one is as simple as they seem at first." Just then, Sebastian walked into the cafe. His face looked worried as he hurried over to their table. "Charlotte? Bianca? What's going on here?" he asked. Charlotte stood up and took Sebastian's hands. "You're probably going to be upset with me for doing this without telling you, but I had to try to fix things." Sebastian frowned, but didn't get a chance to say anything before Bianca spoke. Your fiancée is quite the woman, Sebastian, Bianca said softly. She made me an offer that's making me think twice about everything. Sebastian turned to Charlotte, surprise and admiration in his eyes. You never stop surprising me, he said. For the rest of the day, the three of them talked. It wasn't easy, and there were some tears. But in the end, they reached an agreement. Bianca accepted the job offer, agreeing to drop her threats against Sebastian. Later, as the sun set over Cedar Grove, Sebastian hugged Charlotte tightly. You're incredible. You took a big risk to fix this. Charlotte smiled up at him. I'd do anything for us. In the months that followed, life changed for everyone. Charlotte and Sebastian had a small, beautiful wedding in the garden at Hawthorne Manor, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Even Bianca came, keeping her promise to work for the family business and starting to build her own future. As for Charlotte and Sebastian, they faced life together, hand in hand. There were hard days, but they worked through them with love and teamwork. One afternoon, about a year later, Charlotte was organizing books in the library when Sebastian walked in and hugged her. You know, he said, sometimes I still think about how this all started, with you planning my wedding to someone else. Charlotte laughed. Life sure has a funny sense of humor. Sebastian smiled, his eyes full of love. I wouldn't change a single thing. Every moment brought us here to you. Charlotte kissed him. Not even the tough times? Especially the tough times, Sebastian replied. They showed us how strong we are together. As the sun set outside the library, casting a golden light through the windows, Charlotte and Sebastian held each other, feeling grateful for their journey and excited for their future. True love, they realized, isn't about big gestures or perfect moments. It's about choosing each other every day and building a life together. And on that quiet afternoon, they knew their love would only grow stronger with time. Thank you for watching. If you liked this story and want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. That way you won't miss any new videos. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and share what you think in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. We'll see you in the next story.